Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have as our guest Sunil Kant Munjal, Joint Managing Director of Hero MotoCorp, and he's going to talk to us about India's economic reforms in the context of the forthcoming budget, which is just 2 months away, and what are the industry's expectations of the government, and what does the industry really think about growth revival, the most critical aspect of India's economic existence today. Welcome to our show, Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal. So, this government is now 7 months old. Huge expectations were built around Mr. Modi's arrival on the scene as Prime Minister. And in recent weeks, I hear some, I wouldn't say disappointment, but some noises suggesting that expectations that were built have not exactly been met. At the same time, industry is willing to, and the investors are willing to wait for the budget, and they are saying that budget will be the big policy statement for this government. So, what is your take on how things are moving so far?
You're absolutely right, Venu, that there is very high degree of expectation of this government. And if you remember, the entire run-up to the election was based on a developmental, a growth and a reform agenda by the BJP and its allies. And the expectation was very, very high, especially considering the numbers that they got in Parliament. And also there was a very high degree of communication as a run-up to the election during the campaign. I think what they did was, the moment they came into government, they shut the door on communicating outside openly. Okay. And it appears they are only now wanting to announce things that they have already done, not things which are in currency at the moment or in discussion. Okay. And that, with the added complication of Rajya Sabha not functioning, and we've seen that over the last few weeks, that while Lok Sabha has cleared a number of bills and a lot of the business, but Rajya Sabha has not really functioned. And since the government does not have a majority, I think their ability to move Rajya Sabha has been somewhat limited. So that was disappointing for sure, and that's what you're hearing from people, that we hope that all of the plans that the government had announced, because the government has said we're going to do this, would actually get implemented and also get implemented quickly. Because we have seen a couple of years of a very rough time for the entire economy, for the industry, for consumption. And since some of these things will come in through ordinance, some will actually get pushed back clearly to get announced in the budget. By the way, that was the expectation, that some policy statement would get done earlier, some would happen in the parliament session, and then some would happen in the budget which comes up in February.
Can you name 2 or 3 expectations which people are still waiting for to happen?
So, to be fair to the government, I think they have done a lot of work in a short time. Normally, around the world, when a new government comes in, you say, give them a year or 2, and then we will judge their performance. Sure, yeah. Here, we started asking in 2 weeks' time, why have they not done this? Why have they done this? Sure. So, I guess it's also to do with the high expectation that has been built up.
Yeah.
So the big ones, from the overall economy standpoint, the industry standpoint, the consumer standpoint, were things like GST, the land reform bill, labor reform, the subsidies rationalization. So there's actually a pretty well-defined list that we've talked of now for many years. These are not new, by the way. We've been talking about these now for 7 or 8 years.
So everything is debated, you just have to wait to do them.
Yeah. So as I said, to be fair to the government, there is a lot of work going on ease of doing business, which has been a big concern both for Indian investors and for global investors into India. That India is ranked very low on the global listings.
If I am correct, we further slipped about 4 places in the last 1 year.
Correct. We did. But the government is given an assurance that with what is going on currently, and I can confirm because I've seen some of this going on, what is going on currently, what they are planning to do, with especially with the interface between government and industry and government and citizen, we should see a significant improvement once that is done. But that's still to be completed.
I want to ask you something here. When Mr. Modi came to power, one big expectation that was created, and it came out of Mr. Modi's statement, was that he would sit with the chief ministers and create an ongoing dialogue because states are very critical. Because all the investments actually happen in the states. So the whole, all the talk about single window, doing things within 72 hours, at least getting things to move. Now, do you think enough of that framework is getting established, working with the CMs, both in Parliament and outside?
So, what he talked about was creating a more robust federal structure for India, which is really what we need, because if you see over the last couple of decades, a lot of the reform that has happened at the center. And the action is clearly moving down to the states now. And the states' reform has been patchy. Some states have done a fantastic job, and some are middling, and some are still struggling with how to reform their old existing systems.
Get them all on board.
So I think there are two challenges in our federal structure. One is the polity, or the kind of politics that India has pursued over the last 3 or 4 decades, where the role of opposition seems to have become only to oppose. And
whoever is in the opposition.
So if you see worldwide, in the bigger, better democracies, there is a shadow government in place, there's a shadow cabinet in place by the opposition, which supports all initiatives which are good for the nation. I don't think that's happening enough in India. We need to see more alignment, especially on key issues which are known to be good for the country.
So you feel that this is particularly true. I agree with you. Maybe in the last 6-7 years. Before that, there was far more cohesion. At least during Vajpayee's term and the first UPA term, there was far more cohesion between in the way opposition and the ruling party interacted, right?
I think also what has happened over time is the way the numbers have changed from the larger parties to regional parties. That has changed the structure itself. I think we are kind of readjusting to this new structure. I really like Mr. Modi's intent to build a stronger federal structure, because that's what we need today. And I really wish him luck on this, and I hope he can get this off the ground quickly. This long session which he had with chief ministers was actually quite interesting. I don't know the full details.
It's interesting you're saying this, but there is a little nuance here which you might want to talk about. While Mr. Modi has a majority in Parliament, he's talking about two things. He's talking about making the federal structure more robust, giving regional leaders, state chief ministers far more power to decide what they want to do.
Yes.
And at the same time, parallelly, a lot of centralization is also happening in regard to decision making, right? Now, these two strands, do you find that at some point they could appear to be contradictory?
I don't think it's a dichotomy, by the way, because in any good organization, in any good structure, in any nation, you have to work at multiple levels, and you need to strengthen each one equally well for the overall system to work smoothly. And I think that's what the attempt is, to strengthen the center. In fact, what he's done on some of the ideas, all of us have talked for a long time, why can't India be cleaner, why can't there be more hygiene? And he's picked up these issues and turned them into national missions. He's fired people's imagination with this. Sure. It's not as if the idea is new. All of us have talked about this for decades, but in this manner, nobody's actually addressed this.
Doing the same thing differently.
Doing it differently and getting a larger section of the population involved. It's like a people's movement now. While it's been driven by government, the ads have been given out by government, the initiation has been done by government, but it's become a people's movement. And that's what you want. In a true democracy, that's what you really want.
So how do you rate, say, the Make in India campaign in this context? What do you, how do you perceive Make in India? Because there have been some different noises coming. For instance, the RBI governor said, he didn't oppose Make in India, but he added another nuance saying that India. It could be Make for India could be better because we can't have an export-led strategy given the global environment and given that developed countries are going through a prolonged kind of slowdown. So, and of course, Swadeshi Jagran Manch is talking about made in India rather than Make in India. So, given these different nuances emerging, how do you see?
So, we are probably the only large, diverse democracy in the world which has tried to jump from being an agrarian economy directly into a market-led services economy. Unfortunately, the kind of numbers we have and the diversity we have in the nation, while it's worked very well, by the way, I have to say services have been a wonderful part of our economy, but can they create enough momentum, enough growth, enough multiplier of jobs to take care of the millions of new young people which will come in? Our numbers are anywhere between 8 to 12 million a year that we need additional new jobs. I don't think it's possible only for services and agriculture to do this for us. So manufacturing has to be a key of our new policy making. From that point of view, I think it's a fantastic idea. What I also like about this is they would actually try to identify what does it mean? What will make it work? So they're focused on some of these areas, like including some of the policy in acts in Parliament as we discussed, like the labor laws, the various labor laws, Land Acquisition Act, etc. These are critical to make them easier functioning and more supportive of growth of the overall economy of India. But that's the only way you can actually create more jobs. You also need to create more entrepreneurs. So the different nuances that you hear from different people are absolutely fine, by the way. Make for India is also a good idea because India is going to be a major consuming nation, which is what we have done. Unlike, in fact, the comparison was made with China. China built an external economy first and is now trying to build a domestic market for themselves. We've actually built a strong domestic market first. And we are now trying to go outside and build India into a global platform. And that is necessary. In today's world, you have to be a part of the global value chain if you want to be successful in any major field. And manufacturing for us is critical because if you just look at the big things India imports, defense, IT hardware, edible oils, many of them actually will get covered if you start to focus on building these in India. We do have within India opportunities which are not necessarily import-led today. Textiles is a massive job creator. House construction, 154 industries are directly connected to house construction, and housing is a social need. So we need to figure out such triggers. So you do a social good. At the same time, you're growing the economy and you're building India into a truly global nation.
We'll discuss this in greater detail, but after a small break. Please don't go away and keep watching RSTV. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are having a conversation with Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, Managing Director of Hero MotoCorp. Mr. Munjal, we were talking about GST. Now, GST is probably the single biggest reform whenever it fructifies. It will take time, of course, which has the potential of making India competitive and therefore potential to make in India possible, right? The multiplicity of taxes that we have today, as you said, we are 29 different markets. They add up to some 30%. And the attempt by GST is to have a simplified single GST, which is less than 20%, hopefully. And this itself will be a huge,
less than 20%.
Yeah, otherwise it doesn't make sense. So this will be a huge fiscal stimulus for the economy and for its competitiveness. So how do you see GST panning out?
So right from the days when VAT, value-added tax, was introduced, the idea was to graduate to a GST. That was only seen as a first step towards bigger and, in fact, the biggest tax reform India has ever done, or independent India has ever done. It's sometimes a bit saddening that it's taken us so long, so many years of discussion and debate to get to this place that finally the finance minister is able to bring this.
Again, this is the problem that you were talking about, the opposition, lack of communication between the opposition and ruling party the last 10 years.
Correct. Our inability to have all major political parties pull in one direction in an area which is definitely known to be good for India, because it has multiple benefits. First, it builds India into one common market. It reduces the inefficiency of transporting goods, etc. It also takes away the incentive of people doing business outside of the system. So there's no incentive for people to sell without invoices now, once the GST comes in.
And mainstreaming of the black economy.
That's what I'm saying. It's a big issue. I'm not sure how many people realize this. All of the benefits of this. Plus, it is known to be buoyant for revenues for the states, which we saw also when the value-added tax was introduced. So really, there is no reason for us not to introduce it quickly. By the way, I don't think it will take too long once you make up your mind, because the backbone is going to be built electronically. Some of the work had already been started earlier. There's a network, it's a separate organization has been set up, which will own and operate that network.
Sure.
So a lot of the thinking has gone in already, because the states and the center have been working at this for a long time. Once we decide, once we get the clearances, we get the acts passed in Parliament, the actual implementation should not take too long.
And Parliament, Rajya Sabha, as well as the state governments, 50% of the state
it needs, right? Yes, it needs a majority.
So if that happens, say in the next 2 years, do you think GST can actually be reality by, say, 2017, according to your...
I think it can be a reality by 2016, sometime during the year, either at the start of the year or sometime during the year, because there was one debate earlier whether it can only start at the start of the new year. But then there was enough economists to show that it can actually start anytime during the year. You just need a cut-off single date across India for accounting purpose. So whether it's 3 months, 6 months, it's possible to do. And I'm hoping this will happen quickly. And the finance minister actually has made his intent very clear, both inside Parliament and outside. And I see more and more alignment. Actually, I think the real issues have gone out, because the government has said we will support and fund any loss of revenue for the first 3 or 5 years. So there is no real reason for anybody to hold back any longer.
Yeah, and Mr. Sunil, in a way, if the opposition and ruling party had come on the same page on this 3 years ago, the BJP would have benefited from GST. By now, it would have kicked off, and the huge stimulus would have actually enabled Mr. Modi and Mr. Jaitley to reap the benefit of GST in some sense, right?
Yeah. See, the GST is clear that NIPFE has done some numbers, which saying it can add anywhere between 1.5 to 2% to the GDP on an ongoing basis, not a one-off. It's an ongoing basis. So it's a massive value creator in the system.
And it'll also lead
it's not the answer to all our problems, but it is certainly a big support to growth.
It's a
big ticket item.
Biggest components in India's competitiveness.
Yes. So on the other hand, again, like I said, the government has done stuff. They've focused on fuel subsidies. They focused on bringing in investment into things like contracts, construction contracts. They have done a number of things which have been started. I only wish they would communicate more about the economic policies which are currently being formed. Also, this interface between government and industry that we discussed earlier, there is a recommendation now to the government to completely eradicate physical interface between government and citizen or industry. Because we have Indian companies doing software systems for other countries. We can certainly use them here. Even our laws, many of our laws, in fact, most of our laws have come from British times, when a small minority was trying to run a country which was primarily against them. So they're actually based on mistrust of people and of the local industry.
So here,
so I think we need to turn this on its head.
Yeah. And do you think that this mistrust is a very serious issue when it comes to the tax department, interface between the tax department and the taxpayers? Is that issue, in your view, is it resolved? Because the last budget, Mr. Jaitley promised that this mistrust will be removed. But his recent statements also suggest that the mistrust still exists and the tax department will have to do something about it.
For a long time, we've actually worked almost in adversarial positions. I think what is required for us is, in fact, I think the big change that took place in 1991 was just the realization that if all of us learn to work together, at least align our interests, the overall benefit to the country is tremendous, which is exactly the same situation today. We have agreed on many things, but in things like revenue, there was still an adversarial position till recently. The government's open, bold statement to say this will not be adversarial, I think has had a calming effect on the system.
Plus the recent statement by the Attorney General in the Supreme Court that cases that the tax department loses in the High Court,
yes,
they may not go in appeal.
They should not keep on pursuing them mindlessly.
Does that help?
Oh, absolutely. Because at this moment or earlier, the policy was the department would pursue it all the way to whatever recourse is available to them. And that was a massive loss of time, energy, resource for the nation.
Transaction costs.
And transaction costs, eventually, even when knowing that they are likely to lose because it goes against the grain of the policy in place. So I think that change, it's a very subtle shift, but the impact is very profound.
And are you happy with retrospective tax statements so far from the government?
So I wish the government could find a way to say, we can take this problem off the table. What they have said may be, and I'm saying this on reflection, may be an equally good way of doing this, saying if we go and fix it, that means we are doing the same thing we are saying should not be done. It has to be also fixed retrospectively. So if the courts give their verdict, which is in favor of the assessees, and the government has promised that this is ability they will not use lightly or not use at all. Because if you see, this has been done in other countries. Sure. But in almost all cases, it has either been done to align what is already a common practice or in favor of assessees. It's very rarely, or maybe to the best of my knowledge, never ever have been done the way it was done in India.
India, yeah, sure. In fact, there's a contradiction there because Mr. Modi and Mr. Jaitley were part of the G20 broader agreement to attack treaty shopping and to sort of curb, black money movement within jurisdictions. So, as per that, GAR, for instance, is an important component of that agreement. But then, as you said, the real issue is whether, with what intention are you using GAR, right?
So GAR is, again, is one of those based on mistrust.
Yeah.
I think
although it exists, it's part of the OECD framework.
Exactly, but it's used the way I mentioned.
Exactly. The way you use it is what matters.
Exactly. Also the way you design it and the way you use it.
And the safeguards that you put in there.
Correct. We were again bringing this in an adversarial position. And I don't think that's a smart move in today's world because the whole world is getting better connected, more informed, and certainly want India to be a leading nation amongst those which actually works in this manner. Because our ability to think in this manner, our teaching and training of mathematics, our ability to design software actually gives us some edge over others. Yeah. And we lose that when we create policies of this nature.
Okay. Tell me, how do you view the economy so far? In the sense, there's a lot of apprehension that private investment is still not picking up. A lot of residual issues, infrastructure companies, private companies are debt-ridden, balance sheets are bad, as our chief economic advisor also mentioned. And there is now some talk that public investment, thinking in the government, the public investment could be used to give a boost to growth. This has been said by the chief economic advisor. Even Mr. Suresh Prabhu has been talking about it. So, what is your view on public investment being a key driver for growth in the next, say, 2 years?
So, the kind of situation we had for the last few years, we were expecting that the markets would start to improve now, consumption and demand would pick up. So we could have seen a consumption-led recovery. So there are only two ways you can recover. One is an investment-led recovery, second is a consumption-led recovery. Now, since demand has improved, but only it's a very patchy recovery right now, the answer right now for us is an investment-led recovery. And big public investment is an absolute essential requirement. It's not desirable. I think it's absolutely essential. And especially in projects which are known to have a big multiplier, and some of them are not otherwise viable for private enterprise to come in. Those in any case have to be done by government. So we have multiple sources. We have government resources at the center and the state. We have private resources and we have foreign resources. I don't think we should be shy of using all of them, by the way. And I'm not even sure it's a debate whether to use one or the other.
You support public investment?
Absolutely. I support public investment.
Another question follows from this.
Yes.
So should
but it must not be the only one. That's the only point I'm making.
Yeah.
It must be alongside others.
Alongside others, of course. But public investment could play a big role.
It will act.
Now, a question that follows from this is, then should we be fundamentalist about a fiscal deficit roadmap of going down to 3%? There is also a view that in the interim, as growth, before growth picks up to say 7% plus, we can live with a fiscal deficit of 4.5% to 5%, provided it's used in productive sectors. Now, do you subscribe to this view?
So, if you see where we are today, inflation is down to about the lowest we've had in quite a while right now.
Inflation is dead.
Our interest rates continue to be still very, very high. So, how do you reconcile this to be able to bring in a mood for investment? See, that's one of the other issues. Our gross capital formation has fallen quarter on quarter, every quarter for the last 13, except the last quarter. It actually went up.
That's why the talk of public investment, right?
Exactly. The last quarter it went up. Then again it slipped this quarter. So I think we have to encourage public investment in areas which we know that the public investment can be beneficial. At the same time, we have to create an environment for private investment to come in and to be welcomed, whether it's by way of higher depreciations. There are a whole list of things which can be done, and the government is fully aware.
And on the fiscal deficit?
And on the fiscal deficit, I think we have to play this very intelligently. We have to watch this carefully because it has the impact of this is very profound globally for India. If you get derated, if your rating goes down, then your ability to raise funding both inside and outside the country goes down, and you don't want to be in that situation. So you were almost in that situation.
Yeah, so there's a contradiction
very fine line there. There is a very fine line. We for growth, sometimes you even have to allow inflation. Yeah. Therefore, allowing a deficit, we ourselves actually pushed back on the government a few years ago.
So how much deficit do you think the global raters or re-raters would tolerate?
So I think from where we are right now, if we go up by 1 to 1.5%, would be the limit they would allow us or accept our rating not to be downgraded. They have been watching India. In fact, in IMF's report, as you're probably aware, there are only 2 countries they've shown in this year as a positive outlook. Only 2 in the world. One is USA and one is India. So there is actually aspiration and hope worldwide. It's not only in India. We have to be smart and take and recognize this and take advantage of this ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I think the system needs to support these big initiatives that the government is launching. At the same time, on the ground, we need to start making changes. In ease of everyday operation, in intermediation going away, in cost of doing business going down, in starting new business becoming easier, in shutting down businesses becoming easier because you need to redeploy assets and resources.
So in short, basically meeting the huge expectations that the world is placing on us. Thank you very much for talking to us, Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.